Hello everyone and welcome back to Mr. Evans History. This is part 2 of the series on the wars between Greece and Persia known as the Greco-Persian Wars. If you haven't watched part 1, go back and watch that first and I'll wait. Right, I'm bored now. So, in this part I will be talking you through the second attempt by Persia to invade Greece after Darius I's attempt failed miserably, focusing particularly on the famous Battle of Thermopyle. As I explained at the end of the last video, King Darius died before he could attempt a second invasion, and so this task would fall to his son, the new king of Persia, Xerxes. Xerxes was successfully able to stop the revolt that was happening in Egypt and refocus his attention back on Greece. So he gathered up his army, which took about 4 years, and prepared to invade. The Greek city-states knew that Persia were gathering their forces ready to invade. Some decided they would join with Persia in order to protect themselves. Some stayed neutral to try and avoid conflict, and others, led by Sparta and Athens, decided to unite together to try and stop the Persians. This time, however, instead of sailing across to attack Athens directly, Xerxes decided to march his army and attack Greece from the north. In 480 BC, the invasion began. Xerxes and his men marched through Thrace and Macedon without much resistance until they reached a place called Thermopylae. At Thermopylae, an army of the united Greek city-states lay waiting for the Persians. This army was around 7,000 men and consisted of soldiers from many regions, including Arcadians, Corinthians, Thespians, and Thebans amongst others. Led by King Leonidas of Sparta, along with 300 of his highly trained Spartan hoplites. Xerxes, on the other hand, arrived with an army of between 70 and 300,000 men. We've no actual proof of the exact number, but we think it's around that. The ancient Greek historian Herodotus claimed that the Persians had 1 million men, but this is almost certainly an exaggeration. Either way, the Greeks were outnumbered by at least 10 to 1. So, this is an overview of the Battle of Thermopylae in 480 BC. The Persian army is situated here, with the Persian camp a little bit further back, and the Greek army was located here, with their camp again further back. You'll notice that on one side there is the Gulf of Malia, and on the other there is a mountain region. So that meant that the Persians only had one route if they wanted to get past, and that was directly through the Spartans, the Thebans, the Thespians, and all of the Greeks who were situated here. This meant that because the pass was so narrow that the Persian numbers didn't really give much of an advantage, so they could only fight a few at a time. The Greek army, led by the Spartans, held off wave after wave of Persian attack with only minimal losses. Even the famous Persian elite warriors known as the Immortals were unable to overcome the Spartan hoplites. That is until on the third day, a local Greek citizen named Ephialtes found his way to the Persian camp, and in exchange for money showed the Persians a little-known mountain path which would lead their men behind Leonidas and the Greeks. So Ephialtes goes to King Xerxes, and in exchange for money, he shows the Persian army a route, which is this dotted line here, through the mountain path, so that some of the army could come around the back of the Spartans. Their doom was soon to come. King Leonidas called a war council and told the soldiers that anyone who wished to leave could go. The majority decided to leave rather than die, leaving only a few soldiers remaining, including the 300 Spartan warriors and the Thespians. The remaining Greeks held strong, ultimately fighting to the death as they were surrounded on both sides. The Greek army may have eventually lost at Thermopylae, but against overwhelming odds they held their ground and inspired the rest of Greece to unite together to fight back against the Persians. Such was the fight that the Spartans put up during the Battle of Thermopylae. Even to this day we remember the heroic act of those 301 men. After Thermopylae, Xerxes and his army continued to march south, capturing many Greek cities along the way. This time they were even successful in reaching Athens and burning much of it to the ground. However, the Persians lost a major naval battle at Salamis, and a large proportion of their ships were destroyed. Fearing that it would be trapped in Europe, King Xerxes retreated back to Asia and left one of his generals to try and complete the invasion. The following spring, however, the Greeks united together and pushed back against the Persians, winning major victories at the Battle of Plataea and the Battle of Mysail. By the end of 479 BC, the Greeks had pushed the Persians out of Europe completely and had even taken the region of Ionia, the region that Athens and Sparta had originally tried to help out during the revolts. As a result, Persia was weakened massively, and 30 years later, in 449 BC, peace was signed between the two countries, ending half a century of conflict. So, that's the end of part 2 of the Greco-Persian Wars. If you're interested in finding out more, I suggest you have a look at the Spartans, who had a very interesting and unique way of life. See you all again soon on Mr. Evans History. Take care.